Jake Miller walked through the tall glass doors of the Galactic Academy. His heavy boots made loud sounds on the smooth floor. Other students moved quietly past him. Their feet made no noise at all. Jake looked around at the strange building. Everything was white and silver. The walls curved in odd ways. Soft blue light came from everywhere and nowhere. He carried a simple black bag on his shoulder. Most other students had floating devices that followed them around. Jake had tried one of those things yesterday. It broke after 10 minutes. The repair shop told him he was too heavy-handed for their technology. The hallways were full of students from different worlds. Jake saw beings with blue skin and forearms. Others had scales like lizards. Some looked like they were made of crystal. A few floated in the air instead of walking. Jake was the only human in the entire academy. He found his first class and walked inside. The room was circular with seats arranged in rings around a central platform. Jake picked a seat in the middle row. The chair was too small for him. He squeezed into it anyway. Other students filed in quietly. They whispered to each other in languages Jake could not understand. Some of them looked at him with curious eyes. Others seemed nervous. A few moved to seats farther away from him. Jake tried to smile at a small purple creature sitting nearby. The creature's eyes went wide. It quickly looked away. Jake wondered if smiling meant something bad in the creature's culture. He made a mental note to ask about that later. The professor entered the room. She was tall and thin, with silver skin that seemed to glow. She had 6 eyes arranged in pairs down her face. Her movements were graceful and smooth. She wore flowing robes that changed color as she walked. "Good morning, students," she said. Her voice was musical and pleasant. "I am Professor Zethka. Welcome to Introduction to Xenobiology." The students responded with various sounds. Some chirped. Others made clicking noises. A few hummed in harmony. Jake just said, "Good morning," in a normal voice. His voice seemed too loud in the room. Professor Zethka's eyes focused on Jake. "Today we have a special addition to our class. This is Jake Miller from Earth. He is the first human to attend our academy." The room fell completely silent. Every student turned to stare at Jake. Some of them had never seen a human before. Jake waved his hand in a friendly gesture. Several students flinched as if he had threatened them. "Perhaps you could tell us about your homeworld," Professor Zethka suggested. "What is Earth like?" Jake thought for a moment. Where should he start? Earth was just normal to him. He had never thought about it being special or different. "Well," he said slowly, "it's got land and water. We have weather that changes. Sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's cold. We have animals and plants. People live in cities and towns." The students looked confused. One of them, a creature with tentacles for arms, raised a limb. "What do you mean by weather that changes?" Jake was surprised by the question. "You know, like rain and snow, wind and storms. The temperature goes up and down depending on the season." The tentacled student looked shocked. "The temperature changes on its own?" "Sure," Jake said. "In winter, it might be 20 degrees below zero. In summer, it can be over 100 degrees. That's normal." Several students made worried sounds. Professor Zethka's eyes widened. "Your species survives temperature variations of over 100 degrees?" Jake nodded. "We wear different clothes for different weather. Heavy coats in winter, shorts in summer. Most people have heating and air conditioning in their homes." A crystalline student in the front row spoke up. "On my world, the temperature stays exactly the same all year. If it changed by even 2 degrees, our entire ecosystem would collapse." "That sounds boring," Jake said without thinking. Then he realized how that sounded. "I mean, it sounds very stable." "That's probably nice." The crystalline student looked like it might shatter from shock. "Boring? You find climate stability boring? Jake tried to explain. On Earth, we like the changing seasons. Spring brings flowers and new growth. Summer is good for swimming and outdoor activities. Fall has beautiful colors when the leaves change. Winter has snow for skiing and snowball fights. Snowball fights? Professor Zethka asked. It's a game where you throw balls of snow at each other, Jake explained. Kids love it. Adults too, sometimes. The class looked horrified. They seemed to think Jake was describing some kind of violent combat. You throw projectiles at each other for fun? Asked a floating jellyfish-like creature. Well, yeah, Jake sighed. Snow is soft. It doesn't hurt much. The much part made several students gasp. They began whispering frantically to each other. Professor Zethka held up a hand for silence. Let us continue with today's lesson. We will be studying the peaceful herbivores of the Andromeda sector. She activated a holographic display. Images of gentle, flower-eating creatures appeared in the air. They looked like a cross between sheep and butterflies. The students made appreciative sounds. These lovely beings feed only on nectar and soft petals, Professor Zethka explained. They have no natural predators and live in perfect harmony with their environment. Jake studied the creatures. They were pretty, but they seemed almost too delicate to be real. What happens if they get sick? He asked. Sick? The professor looked confused. Yeah, like if they catch a cold or get injured. Do they have immune systems? The class stared at him blankly. Apparently, most species in the galaxy did not deal with illness the way humans did. On Earth, Jake continued, most animals have to fight off diseases and parasites. Our immune systems are constantly working to keep us healthy. When we get sick, we usually recover on our own. Medicine helps, but our bodies do most of the work. This statement caused another wave of concerned whispers. Professor Zethka made notes on a floating pad. Your species regularly battles microscopic invaders? She asked. Jake nodded. Every day, our bodies are full of bacteria and viruses. Most of them are actually helpful, but sometimes we get bad ones that make us sick. Children especially get sick a lot while their immune systems are learning. Several students looked like they might faint. The idea of living with constant microscopic warfare was clearly terrifying to them. The rest of the class passed quietly. Professor Zethka showed more images of peaceful alien creatures. Jake listened politely, but he found it all a bit dull. Where were the predators? The competition? The struggle for survival that made life interesting? When class ended, Jake stood up from his too small chair. The other students gave him a wide berth as they filed out of the room. He heard them whispering about the dangerous human from the Deathworld. Jake was confused. Earth wasn't dangerous. It was just home. He walked out of the classroom, wondering what he had said that scared everyone so much. As he headed to his next class, Jake passed a group of students huddled together. They were looking at something on a data pad. He caught a glimpse of the screen. It showed information about Earth with a large red warning symbol next to it. Jake shook his head and kept walking. He had a feeling this was going to be a very interesting semester. Jake's second class was environmental science. He walked into another circular room, this one with walls that showed moving images of different planets. The teacher was a short, round being with green skin and many small eyes covering its head. I am Professor Nimvo, the teacher said in a squeaky voice. Today we discuss weather patterns across the galaxy. Jake found a seat next to a tall, thin creature that looked like it was made of ice. The creature moved slightly away from him when he sat down. Let us begin with reports from your homeworlds, Professor Nimvo said. Who would like to share first? A small, crystalline being raised a glittering hand. I am Arya from Kepler 442b. Our weather is very pleasant. The temperature stays at exactly 72 degrees all year. We have gentle rain that falls for exactly 30 minutes every 3 days. The class made appreciative sounds. Jake thought that sounded incredibly boring. Excellent, Professor Nimvo said. Very stable, very safe. Next. A purple-scaled creature spoke up. I am Crix from Zeta Reticuli. Our world has 2 seasons. In one season, the temperature is 68 degrees. In the other, it is 74 degrees. Sometimes we have light mist that tickles our scales. More approving sounds from the class. Jake was starting to see a pattern here. Several more students shared similar stories. Gentle breezes, predictable rainfall, temperature changes of only a few degrees. Everyone seemed proud of how stable and safe their weather was. Jake, Professor Nemvo said, please tell us about Earth's weather patterns. Jake scratched his head. Well, we have 4 main seasons: spring, summer, fall, and winter. The temperature can change by more than 100 degrees between seasons. The class fell silent. Professor Nimvo's many eyes blinked in sequence. You mentioned this yesterday, Professor Nimvo said carefully. Can you give us more details? Sure, Jake said. In summer, it can get over 100 degrees. That's hot. Enough to cook an egg on the sidewalk. In winter, it can drop to 40 below zero. That's cold enough to freeze your breath in the air. Several students made distressed sounds. The ice creature next to Jake moved even farther away. But that's not all, Jake continued. We also have thunderstorms. Lightning bolts that can be 5 times hotter than the surface of the sun. Thunder so loud it can shake buildings. Rain that falls so hard you can't see 10 feet in front of you. Professor Nimvo was writing frantically on a datapad. Your species survives these lightning attacks? Oh, we don't usually get hit by lightning, Jake said, but it does happen sometimes. Most people who get struck by lightning actually live through it. We have safety rules about not standing under trees during storms. You have rules about surviving weather? Asked a floating blob-like creature. Lots of them, Jake nodded. Don't go outside during tornadoes. Stock up on food before blizzards. Stay inside during hurricanes. Basic stuff. What is a tornado? Arya asked in a tiny voice. Jake tried to think of how to explain it. It's like a spinning column of air that moves across the ground. Wind speeds can reach over 300 miles per hour. It can pick up cars and houses and throw them around like toys. The class erupted in panicked chittering and squeaking. Professor Nimvo had to call for order. And hurricanes? Professor Nimvo asked when the class settled down. Massive storms that can be hundreds of miles wide, Jake explained. They bring huge amounts of rain, flooding, and winds over 150 miles per hour. The storm surge can push ocean water miles inland. How do you survive these catastrophes? Crix asked, his purple scales quivering. We track them with satellites and weather radar, Jake said. We get warnings days in advance. Most people just evacuate to safer areas. Some people actually chase hurricanes and tornadoes to study them. For science? Professor Nimvo asked hopefully. Some for science, Jake said. But some people just think it's fun. Storm chasing is a hobby for some humans. The class looked like they were going to be sick. The idea of willingly approaching such dangerous weather was beyond their understanding. What about floods? Asked a plant-like student with leaves for hair. We get those too, Jake said. Rivers overflow during heavy rains. Flash floods can sweep away cars and buildings. But we build dams and levees to control the water. Most of the time they work. Most of the time? The plant student's leaves were turning yellow with stress. Well, nothing's perfect, Jake shrugged. Sometimes the dams break or the levees fail. That's when things get really bad. But we rebuild and try to make them stronger next time. Professor Nimvao was shaking his head. Your species rebuilds in the same dangerous locations? Where else? Would we go? Jake asked. Besides, not everywhere has the same problems. Some places get earthquakes instead of hurricanes. Some get wildfires. Some get blizzards. You just learn to deal with whatever your area has. Earthquakes? Several students said at once. The ground shakes and cracks, Jake explained. Buildings fall down, roads split open. We have building codes to make structures more earthquake resistant. And we practice earthquake drills in school. You train children to survive ground-shaking disasters? Professor Nimvo's voice was getting higher. Sure, Jake said. We also practice fire drills and tornado drills. Kids need to know what to do in emergencies. The class was staring at him like he had grown a second head. Jake was starting to realize that Earth might be more dangerous than he had thought. What about wildfires? Asked a student who looked like a walking tree. Forest fires can spread really fast, Jake said. Sometimes they're started by lightning. Sometimes by people being careless. They can burn thousands of acres and destroy whole towns. The tree student's bark was turning gray with fear, but firefighters work to stop them, Jake added quickly. And controlled burns can prevent bigger fires. Some plants actually need fire to reproduce. It's all part of the natural cycle. Fire is part of your natural cycle? Professor Nimvo squeaked. In some places, yeah, Jake said. Prairie fires clear out old growth and help new plants grow. Some tree seeds only open when they're heated by fire. The class was silent for a long moment. Finally, a small furry creature raised a paw. Do you have any gentle weather on Earth? It asked hopefully. Jake thought about it. Well, spring is pretty nice. Flowers bloom. Trees get new leaves. Though we do get severe thunderstorms in spring. And tornadoes are most common then. The furry creature's ears drooped. Summer can be pleasant, Jake continued. Good for swimming and barbecues. But there are heat waves that can kill people. And hurricane season runs from June through November. What about fall? Asked the ice creature. Fall is beautiful, Jake said with a smile. The leaves change colors, red, orange, yellow. It's really gorgeous. Of course, that's when we get the first frost that kills all the plants. And winter storms start forming. Winter? Professor Nimvo asked weakly. Snow and ice everywhere, Jake said. Blizzards can dump several feet of snow in one day. Ice storms can bring down power lines and trees. Cars slide off roads. People can freeze to death if they're not careful. The class sat in stunned silence. Jake looked around at their shocked faces. It's really not that bad, he said, trying to be reassuring. Humans are pretty adaptable. We have heating systems, warm clothes, snow plows. Most people actually enjoy winter weather. Skiing, ice skating, building snowmen. You build structures out of frozen precipitation? Arya whispered. Just for fun, Jake said. Kids love making snowmen and snow angels and having snowball fights. You wage war with frozen projectiles? Crix asked in horror. It's not war, Jake laughed. It's just playing. The snow is soft. Well, unless it's packed really hard. Then it can hurt a bit. Professor Nimvo was frantically typing on his datapad. I need to update Earth's classification in our database, he muttered. What classification? Jake asked. Currently, Earth is listed as a Class 7 variable climate world, Professor Nimvo said. But based on your descriptions, it should be classified as a Class 12 extreme weather Deathworld. Deathworld? Jake was surprised. That seems a bit dramatic. The entire class stared at him. To them, a planet where the weather could kill you was absolutely a death world. The fact that humans thought it was normal was terrifying. When class ended, Jake walked out to find a crowd of students waiting in the hallway. Word had spread about the human and his stories of the dangerous weather world. They whispered and pointed as he passed. Jake heard fragments of conversation. Temperature swings of over 100 degrees ... Spinning death columns ... Frozen water projectiles. He realized he was becoming famous at the academy, not for being smart or talented, but for being the strange creature who survived on an impossibly dangerous world. Jake headed to the cafeteria for lunch, wondering what other normal things about Earth would shock his new classmates. Jake entered the advanced biology classroom, carrying his lunch tray. The room was larger than the others, with specimen tanks lining the walls. Strange creatures floated in glowing blue liquid. Jake tried not to stare at them too much. He sat at a table with several students he recognized from his previous classes. They looked nervous but curious. Jake was getting used to that reaction. Professor Delanine glided into the room. She was tall and elegant, with skin like polished metal and hair that moved like liquid silver. Her voice had a musical quality that made everything sound important. Today we examine the delicate balance of predator and prey relationships, she announced. We will study the gentle ecosystems of the Centauri colonies. She activated a holographic display. Beautiful, park-like landscapes appeared in the air. Creatures that looked like fluffy balls with legs hopped around eating colorful flowers. Everything seemed peaceful and safe. These are flufflings, Professor Delanine explained. They are the primary herbivores of Centauri Prime. They eat only the sweetest flower petals and sleep in beds of soft moss. The class made appreciative, cooing sounds. Jake thought the flufflings looked like living stuffed animals. They have no natural predators, Professor Delanine continued. Their world is perfectly balanced. No creature harms another. They live in complete harmony. Jake raised his hand. What keeps their population under control? Professor Delanine looked confused. Control? Why would they need control? Well, if nothing eats them and they keep reproducing, wouldn't they eventually run out of food? Jake asked. The class went quiet. This was apparently not something they had considered. Their reproduction naturally slows when resources become limited, Professor Delanine said carefully. That's smart, Jake said. On Earth, we have a different system. Predators eat prey animals to keep the population balanced. It's more direct. Your world has predators? Asked Luna, a pale student with large, dark eyes. Lots of them, Jake sighed. Lions, tigers, bears, wolves, sharks. All kinds of creatures that hunt other animals for food. The class exchanged worried glances. This was clearly disturbing news. Can you tell us about these predators? Professor Delanine asked, though she looked like she might regret the question. Jake thought about where to start. Well, let's see. Grizzly bears can weigh up to 800 pounds and stand 8 feet tall on their hind legs. They have claws like knives and can run 35 miles per hour. Several students made frightened sounds. Luna looked like she might faint. They're incredibly strong, Jake continued. A grizzly can decapitate a moose with one swipe of its paw. But they're also pretty smart. They can open car doors and solve simple puzzles. Your prey animals travel in metal containers? Asked a student with tentacles for arms. Cars aren't for prey animals, Jake laughed. Humans use cars for transportation. The bears have learned to break into them looking for food. The predators hunt humans? Professor Delanine's voice went up an octave. Sometimes, Jake said, but it's pretty rare. Most predators are afraid of humans. We're not their usual prey. What is their usual prey? Luna asked in a whisper. Other animals, Jake said. Deer, elk, fish, smaller mammals. The whole food chain is connected. Plants feed herbivores. Herbivores feed carnivores. And when the carnivores die, they decompose and feed the plants. The class looked horrified at this description of the cycle of life and death. But that's just land predators, Jake continued. Ocean predators are even more impressive. Great white sharks can grow up to 20 feet long. They have multiple rows of razor-sharp teeth and can smell blood from miles away. Your oceans are filled with these monster fish? Crix asked, his purple scales turning pale. Sharks aren't monsters. Jake said, they're just really good at what they do. They've been around for over 400 million years. They're basically perfect predators. And humans enter these waters? Professor Delanine asked. All the time, Jake said. Swimming, surfing, diving. Most people never see a shark. And shark attacks are incredibly rare. You're more likely to be struck by lightning. The class remembered his previous description of lightning and shuddered. Some people actually swim with sharks on purpose, Jake added. Cage diving is a popular tourist activity. They voluntarily enter metal containers to be near the predators? Luna's voice was barely audible. Yeah, it's pretty cool, Jake said. You get to see them up close. They're actually quite beautiful. Professor Delanine was taking rapid notes. What other predators exist on your world? Jake thought about it. Well, there are big cats, lions, tigers, leopards, jaguars. They're all ambush predators with incredible speed and strength. A tiger can leap 30 feet horizontally and drag prey twice its body weight up a tree. They climb? Asked a student who looked like a walking flower. Most cats are excellent climbers, Jake said. Leopards often store their kills in trees to keep them away from other predators. Other predators compete for the same prey? Professor Delanine asked. Sure, Jake said. Lions and hyenas fight over kills all the time. Hyenas have incredibly strong jaws that can crush bones. They hunt in packs and are very smart. Pack hunters? The flower student's petals were wilting. Lots of predators hunt in groups, Jake explained. Wolves, wild dogs, some types of cats. It lets them take down much larger prey. What about flying? Predators? Asked a student with feathered wings. Eagles, hawks, falcons, Jake said. They have incredible eyesight and can dive at speeds over 200 miles per hour. Their talons can crush bones. The winged student's feathers ruffled with fear. But the really scary predators are the small ones, Jake continued. Mosquitoes kill more humans than any other animal. They spread diseases like malaria and yellow fever. Tiny predators? Professor Delanine looked confused. Parasites, really, Jake said. We also have ticks that spread Lyme disease, fleas that can carry plague, and various venomous spiders and snakes. Your world has venomous creatures? Luna whispered. Tons of them, Jake said. Black widow spiders, rattlesnakes, coral snakes, scorpions. Some people keep them as pets. The class erupted in panicked chittering and squeaking. Professor Delanine called for order. You domesticate venomous predators? She asked when the room quieted. Some people do, Jake said. Snake enthusiasts. Spider collectors. Most people think they're crazy, but it's a hobby. What about your plant life? Asked the flower student. Surely your plants are peaceful? Jake winced. Actually, we have carnivorous plants too. Venus flytraps, pitcher plants, sundews. They catch and digest insects. Plants that eat animals? The flower student looked sick. Just small ones, Jake said quickly. And we have plants that are poisonous or cause rashes. Poison ivy, poison oak, deadly nightshade. Some mushrooms can kill you if you eat them. Your food sources are potentially lethal? Professor Delanine's hands were shaking. Only if you don't know what you're doing, Jake said. We teach children early which plants are safe and which ones to avoid. You train your young to identify deadly flora? Luna asked. Basic survival skills, Jake said. We also teach them to avoid dangerous animals, what to do if they encounter a predator, and how to get help in emergencies. The class sat in stunned silence. The idea of a world where children needed survival training was beyond their comprehension. How do humans survive in such a dangerous environment? Professor Delanine asked. We adapt, Jake said. We're persistence hunters. We might not be as fast or strong as other predators, but we're smart and we never give up. We use tools, work together, and learn from our mistakes. Persistence hunters? Crix asked. We chase prey until it gets tired, Jake explained. Humans can run for hours without stopping. We sweat to cool down, which lets us keep going when other animals overheat. You hunt by exhausting your prey? Professor Delanine looked horrified. It's very effective, Jake said. Early humans could chase down almost any animal given enough time. But modern humans don't hunt anymore, right? Luna asked hopefully. Some do, Jake said. Hunting is still popular for sport and food. But most people get their meat from farms now. You domesticate prey animals? Asked the tentacled student. Cows, pigs, chickens, sheep, Jake said. We raise them for food. It's more efficient than hunting wild animals. The class looked like they were going to be sick. The idea of raising animals specifically to kill them was deeply disturbing too. These gentle beings? At least you don't eat predators, the flower student said weakly. Actually, we eat those too, Jake said. Shark fin soup is a delicacy in some places. People hunt bears, gators, even lions in some parts of the world. You prey on the predators? Professor Delanine's voice was barely a whisper. Humans are apex predators, Jake said. We're at the top of the food chain. We eat pretty much everything. The room fell completely silent. The students stared at Jake with a mixture of fear and fascination. He realized he had just described himself as the ultimate predator on a world full of deadly creatures. But we're also vegetarians sometimes, he added quickly. Lots of humans only eat plants. This didn't seem to comfort them much. The fact that humans could choose to be predators or herbivores was somehow even more terrifying. When class ended, Jake walked out to find an even larger crowd waiting in the hallway. Word was spreading fast about the human from the Deathworld. Students whispered about apex predators and persistence hunters as he passed. Jake was stunned. Jake walked into his developmental psychology class, feeling tired. The stares and whispers in the hallways were getting overwhelming. Every student seemed to know about the dangerous human and his stories of Earth's deadly wildlife. The classroom was smaller and more comfortable than the others. Soft lighting created a warm atmosphere. The professor was a middle-aged being with kind eyes and a gentle manner. She had pale blue skin and moved with slow, careful gestures. Welcome, everyone, she said in a soothing voice. I am Professor Yalem. Today we discuss childhood development across different species. Jake took a seat in the back, hoping to avoid attention. But several students had already spotted him and were whispering excitedly to their neighbors. Let us begin by sharing experiences. From our own early development, Professor Yalem said. How were you raised? What was your childhood like? A small, furry creature raised its paw. I am Ben from the vegan system. As a child, I lived in a protected nursery dome. The temperature was kept exactly at 70 degrees. My food was delivered through tubes, already processed and safe to eat. I never experienced hunger or discomfort. The class nodded approvingly. This sounded like a proper childhood to them. Excellent, Professor Yalaham said. Safe, controlled, nurturing. Next. crystalline student spoke up. I am Zara from the crystal caves of Altair. My childhood was spent in meditation chambers, filled with healing light. I absorbed nutrients directly from the crystal walls. I never experienced physical stress or danger. More approving sounds from the class. Jake was starting to see a pattern in how these alien children were raised. Several more students shared similar stories. Protected environments, processed foods, constant supervision, no exposure to danger or discomfort. Their childhoods sounded like living in hospitals to Jake. Jake, Professor Hyalahem said gently, would you share your childhood experiences with us? Jake knew this was going to be trouble, but he couldn't think of a way to avoid it. Well, I grew up in a small town in Ohio. I lived with my parents and little sister in a regular house. What other activities did you engage in? Asked a floating student that looked like a jellyfish. We went camping every summer, Jake said. My dad would take us to the mountains or by a lake. We'd sleep in tents and cook food over a campfire. You deliberately entered wilderness areas? Professor Yalahem's hands were shaking. It was fun, Jake said. We'd go hiking, fishing, swimming. At night, we'd sit around the fire and tell stories. Sometimes we'd hear wolves howling in the distance. Predators were in the vicinity? Ben's fur was now completely standing up. Sure, but they usually stayed away from people, Jake said. We just had to be smart about storing our food so bears wouldn't get into it. Bears? Several students said at once. I mentioned them before, Jake said. Big predators. They like human food, so you have to hang it up high in trees or put it in special containers. Your family shared territory with massive predators? Zara asked. The wilderness doesn't belong to humans, Jake explained. We're just visitors. We have to respect the animals that live there. Did you encounter any of these predators? Asked the jellyfish student. A few times, Jake said. Once a black bear wandered through our campsite at night. We just stayed in our tents and made noise until it left. Another time we saw a mountain lion, but it ran away when it saw us. The class looked terrified. Professor Yalahem was writing. So fast her stylus was smoking. What about water activities? She asked. You mentioned swimming. Yeah, lakes, rivers, the ocean. Jake said. Swimming is great exercise. My parents taught me when I was really little. They submerged you in water as an infant? Ben squeaked. Not as an infant, Jake laughed. I was maybe 4 or 5. Most kids learn to swim pretty young, in case they fall into water accidentally. Accidental submersion is a concern? Professor Yalahem asked. Drowning is one of the leading causes of death for children, Jake said matter-of-factly. That's why we teach water safety early. The class looked like they were about to panic. The idea that water was dangerous enough to require special training was horrifying to them. But swimming is mostly safe if you know what you're doing, Jake added. Quickly, we have lifeguards at public pools and beaches. And you learn to recognize dangerous conditions, like rip currents. Water can move dangerously? Zara asked. Ocean currents are incredibly powerful, Jake said. A rip current can pull you out to sea if you don't know how to escape it. But they teach you in swimming lessons how to swim parallel to shore until you're out of the current. Children receive combat training against hostile water? The jellyfish student asked. It's not combat, Jake said. It's just technique. Like learning to float if you get tired, or how to tread water. What other survival skills were you taught? Professor Yalahem asked. Jake thought about it. Basic first aid. How to treat cuts and burns. What to do if someone is choking. CPR in case someone stops breathing. You were trained in medical procedures as a child? Ben asked. Simple stuff, Jake said. Every kid should know how to help in an emergency. We also learned fire safety, what to do in earthquakes, and how to call for help. Your world requires emergency protocols for children. Professor Yalahem was looking pale. Better safe than sorry, Jake said. We had tornado drills at school. Everyone would go to the basement and wait until the all-clear signal. Educational facilities have defensive bunkers? Zara asked. Just basements, Jake said. Tornadoes can't reach you underground. Though one time in high school, we had a real tornado warning during class. Everyone stayed calm and followed the procedures. No one got hurt. You experienced an actual disaster scenario? The jellyfish students' tendrils were quivering. It passed by about 2 miles from the school, Jake said. We could see it through the windows after it was safe to come up. It was actually pretty impressive. You observed the destructive phenomenon? Professor Yalahem asked in disbelief. From a safe distance, Jake said. It's not every day you see a tornado up close. The class sat in stunned silence. To them, Jake was describing a childhood of constant danger and survival training. What about leisure activities? Ben asked hopefully. Surely you had some peaceful recreation? Sure, Jake said. We played video games, watched movies, read books. Though a lot of kids' shows and games involved some kind of conflict or adventure. Entertainment media depicted violence? Professor Yalahem asked. Not really violence, Jake said. More like heroes overcoming challenges. Cartoons were characters. Get knocked around but always bounce back. Adventure stories where the good guys defeat the bad guys. Your entertainment normalized conflict? Zara's crystal structure was glowing with stress. I guess you could see it that way, Jake said. But it teaches kids about courage, friendship, and standing up for what's right. Were there any completely safe activities? The jellyfish student asked desperately. Jake thought hard. Board games. I guess, though even those often involve competition and strategy. We played games like Risk, where you try to conquer the world. The class groaned collectively. Even their peaceful activities involved warfare. What about playground equipment? Professor Yalahem asked. Oh, we had great playgrounds, Jake said enthusiastically. Swings that went really high, tall slides, monkey bars, seesaws. The jungle gym was my favorite. It was like a big climbing structure. You ascended recreational torture devices? Ben asked weakly. They weren't torture devices, Jake laughed. They were fun. Though kids did get hurt sometimes. I saw plenty of broken bones and scraped knees on the playground. The recreational facilities caused regular injuries? Professor Yalahem was hyperventilating. That's how kids learn their limits, Jake said. If you never take risks, you never learn what you're capable of. Your species deliberately exposes children to danger for educational purposes? Zara asked. Not danger exactly, Jake said. Calculated risks. With proper supervision, most activities are pretty safe. Define proper supervision, Professor. Yalahem said. An adult nearby who can help if something goes wrong, Jake said. Though my parents believed in letting us figure things out for ourselves most of the time. Minimal intervention child rearing? The jellyfish student asked. My mom used to say that scraped knees build character, Jake said. Her job wasn't to prevent us from getting hurt, but to teach us how to handle it when we did. The class looked like they were witnessing a description of systematic child abuse. How did you survive to adulthood? Ben asked in amazement. Most kids do fine, Jake said. Humans are pretty tough. And all those experiences made us stronger and more confident. The trauma strengthened you? Professor Yalahem asked. It wasn't trauma, Jake said. It was just growing up. Learning to ride a bike, playing sports, exploring the woods. That's what childhood is supposed to be like. The class exchanged worried glances. Their definition of childhood was very different from Jake's. When the class ended, Jake walked out. to find the largest crowd yet waiting in the hallway. News of his traumatic childhood had spread throughout the academy. Students whispered about combat training and survival protocols as he passed. Jake was beginning to realize that his normal human childhood sounded like military boot camp to these sheltered aliens. He wondered what they would think when they heard about human teenagers. Safety measures were in place? Professor Yalahich. Jake walked into his final class of the day, feeling exhausted. The whispers and stares had been getting worse all day. By now, half the academy seemed to know about the human from the Deathworld and his shocking stories. This was advanced interspecies relations taught by Professor Zethka from his first class. The room was packed. Word had spread that the human would be there, and students from other classes had come to listen. Professor Zethka looked nervous as Jake took his seat. She had spent the day reading reports from other professors about Jake's casual descriptions of Earth's dangers. Today, we discuss adaptation and survival strategies across different worlds, she announced. We will examine how species develop in response to their environments. She paused and looked directly at Jake. Perhaps we should start with a comprehensive overview of Earth's classification. A holographic display activated, showing Earth floating in space. It looked beautiful and peaceful from a distance. Based on recent information, Professor Zethka continued, our database now classifies Earth as a Class 12 extreme Deathworld. The students murmured nervously. Most of them had never heard of anything above Class 8. The surface temperature varies by over 120 degrees. Professor Zethka read from her notes. Weather patterns include destructive storms with winds exceeding 300 miles per hour. The planet experiences regular seismic activity, volcanic eruptions, and uncontrolled fires. Jake shifted uncomfortably in his seat. When she put it like that, Earth did sound pretty dangerous. The ecosystem contains numerous apex predators, venomous creatures, and carnivorous plants. Even the microscopic life forms pose constant threats to larger organisms. As students were staring at Jake with a mixture of fear and amazement. Most remarkably, Professor Zethka continued, the dominant species not only survives these conditions, but thrives in them. They have spread across the entire planet, adapting to every climate and environment. She turned to Jake. How is this possible? How does humanity not only survive, but dominate such a hostile world? Jake thought carefully about his answer. All day, his normal experiences had shocked and horrified his classmates. He needed to help them understand that humans weren't monsters. We adapt, he said simply. That's what humans do best. We learn, we change, we overcome problems. But the constant dangers, said Arya, the crystalline student from his first class. How do you live with such fear? We don't live in fear, Jake said. We live with awareness. We know the dangers exist, so we prepare for them. Like your childhood. Survival training? Asked Ben, the furry creature from his psychology class. It's not survival training, Jake said. It's just normal life. You learn to swim so you can enjoy the water safely. You learn about weather so you can plan outdoor activities. You learn basic first aid so you can help people who get hurt. But children getting injured regularly, Professor Zethka said. How do parents cope with this? Jake smiled. My mom used to say that Band-Aids and hugs could fix almost anything. The minor injuries heal quickly. And each time you get hurt and recover, you become a little bit stronger. Physical trauma improves resilience? Asked Luna, the pale student who had looked sick during his predator discussions. Not trauma, Jake said. Challenge. If you never face any difficulties, you never learn how to handle them. Humans believe that overcoming small problems prepares you for bigger ones. What about the predators? Asked Crix, his purple scales quivering. How do you coexist with such dangerous creatures? Most predators aren't interested in humans, Jake explained. We're not their natural prey. Shark attacks, bear encounters, big cat sightings, they make the news because they're so rare. But they do happen, Professor Zethka pointed out. Yes, but so do lightning strikes and meteor impacts, Jake said. You can't live your life worrying about every possible danger. You take reasonable precautions and get on with living. What precautions? Asked the jellyfish-like student from his childhood class. Don't swim alone in shark-infested waters. Don't approach wild bears. Don't camp in active volcano zones, Jake said. Common sense stuff. Your common sense would be advanced survival. Training on most worlds. Professor Zethka observed. Jake thought about that. I guess what's normal for us might seem extreme to others. But that's true for everyone, isn't it? He looked around the room. Arya, your world has gravity that would crush me. Crix, I couldn't breathe your atmosphere. Luna, the radiation on. Your moon would kill me in minutes. The students looked surprised. They hadn't considered this perspective. Every world is dangerous to someone, Jake continued. Earth just happens to be dangerous in ways that are obvious. Predators, storms, extreme temperatures. You can see those coming. But your worlds have dangers too. They're just different kinds of dangers. That's an interesting point, Professor Zethka said thoughtfully. The thing is, Jake said, getting warmed up, all those dangers on Earth didn't make us weaker. They made us stronger, not just physically, but mentally. We learned to solve problems, to work together, to never give up. Can you explain? Asked Zara, her crystal structure glowing with curiosity. Humans are persistence hunters, Jake said. That means we don't give up, ever. If we want something, we keep trying until we get it. If there's a problem, we keep working until we solve it, even when facing impossible odds? Ben asked. Especially then, Jake grinned. Humans love a challenge. The bigger the problem, the more determined we become. We've climbed the highest mountains, explored the deepest oceans, and even left our planet to walk on our moon. The class gasped. Space travel was still limited in their galaxy, and planetary exploration was considered extremely dangerous. You voluntarily left your protective atmosphere? Professor Zethka asked in amazement. We wanted to see what was out there, Jake said. Humans are curious. We explore because we can't help ourselves, even when it's dangerous, even when it seems impossible. But why risk it? Luna asked. Why not stay safe on your world? Jake thought about how to explain it. Because safe isn't living. It's just surviving. Humans don't want to just survive. We want to thrive, to grow, to become more than we were. Yesterday, the challenges force evolution, Professor Zethka said, understanding beginning to dawn. Exactly, Jake said. Every time we face a problem and overcome it, we become better. Stronger, smarter, more resilient. The dangers on Earth didn't hold us back. They pushed us forward. So your species sees adversity as opportunity? Asked the tentacled student. We have a saying, Jake said. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. We mean that literally. The room fell silent as the students processed this idea. But surely you prefer peace and safety when possible? Arya asked hopefully. Of course, Jake said. We're not crazy. We like comfort and security as much as anyone. But we also know that growth comes from challenge. A life without any difficulty would be boring. Boring? Several students said it. Once. Humans need purpose, Jake explained. We need goals to work toward, problems to solve, obstacles to overcome. If everything was easy, if there were no challenges, we'd invent some. You create artificial difficulties? Professor Zethka asked. Sports, competitions, puzzles, games, Jake said. We compete against each other, against nature, against our own previous achievements. We're always trying to do better, go faster, climb higher. Your recreational activities simulate the survival challenges of your world, Zara observed. I never thought of it that way. But yeah, Jake said. We race because we needed to run from predators. We swim because we needed to cross rivers. We climb because we needed to escape to high ground. And now you do these things for enjoyment, Ben said wonderingly. The activities our ancestors needed for survival became our sports and hobbies, Jake said. We turned necessity into entertainment. Professor Zyuthka was taking extensive notes. This explains much about human psychology. Your species has transformed trauma into recreation. It's not trauma if you survive it and learn from it, Jake said. It's education. What about cooperation? Asked the jellyfish student. Surely. Such a dangerous world would make your species more aggressive? Actually, the opposite, Jake said. Danger makes humans work together. We're pack animals, like wolves. When there's a threat, we unite against it. Our biggest achievements have always been group efforts. Examples? Professor Zethka asked. Building cities, creating governments, developing technology, Jake said. When a natural disaster hits, humans from around the world send help. When there's a problem too big for one person to solve, we work together until we figure it out. Adversity promotes cooperation, Luna said softly. Shared struggle creates strong bonds, Jake agreed. Humans who have been through tough times together become like family. The class was beginning to look at Jake differently. Instead of a terrifying predator from a nightmare world, they were starting to see him as someone who had been shaped by challenges into something remarkable. So Earth's dangers were actually beneficial? Arya asked. They made us what we are, Jake said. Without the challenges, we'd just be another species living quiet lives on a peaceful world. The dangers forced us to become creative, resilient, and determined. And that's why you're here, Professor Zethka said with sudden understanding. The first human to attend our academy, traveling further from home than any human before you. Jake nodded. Becca,